first part of this afternoon's tour is a panoramic of the entire wine area, including very famous like Mouton Rothschild. And then after that we have wine tastings somewhere, and with photo stops. They've divided the passengers into 4 buses that are going to 4 different chateaux for wine tasting before dinner. Instead of using these little cabins for fishing, they've turned more into a little man cave, and they sell them for upwards of 20,000 euros.
If you come here during the summer, you will find that during the day it can get very, very hot. However, at night, the second the sun goes down, the temperature drops quite brutally. And that's where the gravel comes into play, because the gravel is going to heat up in the sun all day long. And then when it gets cooler at night, the gravel will reflect the accumulated heat back out onto the low-hanging bunches of grapes. And this ensures a much more even maturation of the bunches. It also avoids a temperature shock, between day and night. The other reason also we keep the vines so small here in Bordeaux is because that way we shorten the distance the sap has to travel from the roots to the fruit-bearing branches, and that way the vine basically doesn't waste any energy on circulating sap, and it can focus all its attention on making high-quality grapes. So the bottom line is having these tiny, tiny vines is very good for the grape growing process. However, it's not quite so nice for the poor vineyard workers back who have to take care of them.
Here's a better look at all the rocks and gravel that are in the vineyards that heat up and help the growth of the vines. This is the Medoc region, and either you work in the wine trade
so
or you retire.
If you just look at the plot of vines that's on the right-hand side of the coach, you can start to see that gravel that I was telling you about. In Bordeaux, in general, unpicked by hand, okay? 60% is machine done. However, for the classified growths, you can be sure that all the classified chateaus, they actually do a manual harvest and not a mechanical one. The thing is, mechanical harvests are great in the sense that they're fast and they're a lot cheaper, but the problem is the tractor does not discriminate. It just picks everything, whether it's ready, good, bad, not, all of that. Whereas a manual harvest is, of course, much more,
Everybody but me is outside of the bus because the guide is taking them through a very lengthy description of pruning the vines. They start their work in November, what they prune them down to, and how the work goes on all year. I'm too much been there, done it. 90% of the workers in the fields are migrants. They're not French. This is not a profession that you aspire to unless you own the whole chateau and you don't have to actually do the back-breaking work in the fields.
Now, an interesting fact about Lafite Rothschild is that Lafite Rothschild was very heavily occupied by the Nazis during World War II, purely for strategic reasons. Of course, nothing to do with the wine cellar that they joyfully plundered whilst they were in there. But because of the plundering that went on in Lafite Rothschild, a lot of the other chateaus got smart because they knew they had to give the Nazis something, but they didn't want to give them all their good wine. Some of them would go as far as building fake walls in their cellars, complete with dust and cobwebs, behind which they'd hide the good vintages and they'd leave out the not so good ones. Now, nowadays, Chateau Lafite Rothschild is not your everyday drinking wine, okay? Starting prices is around 900 to 1,000 euros per bottle. That's for a young bottle, okay? But the most expensive bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild ever sold was a bottle said to belong to Thomas Jefferson. It was auctioned off for $156,000, in fact. So the Medoc is not only famous for its wines, it's also famous because every year it hosts one of France's most popular sporting events, which is the Marathon of the Medoc. Alright, so you'll be able to see Chateau Mouton Rothschild in just a few seconds. It's coming up on the left-hand side. Fun fact about Mouton Rothschild is every year since 1945, they have gotten a famous artist to design their label for them. So instead of having the traditional chateau picture, and I believe the deal is if you create the label for Mouton Rothschild, if you give them a picture for their label, they will give you 6 cases of that vintage, in exchange. It just was a sketch of a young naked lady. Now, keep in mind, it's really not very graphic. You can Google it. Now, by this point of your stay here in Bordeaux, ladies and gentlemen, you are probably thinking that we are utterly and completely obsessed with wine around here. And you're quite right if you're thinking that we are totally obsessed with wine in this area.
A brother and sister had a share in a estate. It's Pichon something. Here it is, Pichon Baron. It's the brother's estate.
So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think of this one here? It's not too shabby, is it? Now, Chateau Pichon Baron actually belongs to an insurance company, so nobody actually lives in there. And I believe now they have a sort of luxury bed and breakfast type gig going on the top floor. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. The entrance to Chateau Latour is coming up just here on the left. And Chateau Latour currently belongs to Mexican-American actress Salma Hayek's husband. So I think we can say they both made a pretty sweet deal in that marriage. Alright, so here we're leaving behind Pauillac now, and we're entering into the St. Julian alphabet names. There's Chateau Léoville-Lascaux, Chateau Léoville-Poix-Ferré, and Chateau Léoville-Bar. One is rabbits. We have big problems with rabbits because first of all they love to eat the baby vines. They find them very tasty. But
it's wines of St. Julian this way.
So
by the way, it is illegal to irrigate your vines. One chateau after another. Here is going to be our wine tasting. Bonjour.
Hi.
This is where we are. Chateau Marquis du Terme, Grand Cru class in 1855. We use just 3 kinds of grape here, not the Merlot, a little Merlot.
So,
the wine is so strong in here, you can smell it. It's also freezing. It's a rosé. These are the prices. I didn't know they did a rosé.
So that's why we don't make rosé here. This is coming from another region. Everything is made there. That's why we have the appellation Côte de Provence and Bordeaux. Same
tasting.
Those are 2 different things. Words about this wine. First of all, the composition of the wine. Here we talk about 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, 45% of Merlot, and 5% of Petit Verdot. 12 months in barrels with 13% of new barrels for the aging. Called a light red wine for the region. Because of course, the lightest red wine.
This last one is a lot heavier, which I like. You have to remember, we owe everything to the Romans because they're the ones that brought viniculture to the throughout Europe.
20% Cabernet Sauvignon, 25% Merlot, and 5% of Petit Verdot. 70, 25, 5. Here we talk about an aging of 18 months in barrels with 60% of new barrels for the aging. It's much deeper, darker than the previous one. We're obviously on something else here.
option number 1 is to decant the wine.
There is now a walk to take photographs of well-renowned Chateau Margaux, which that is a famous Chateau Margaux. We have a couple other stops to see some other famous chateau.
The same architect who designed this chateau also designed Chateau Pichon Baron, the one that we saw a little earlier on. That's why this one is often called Pichon Baron's baby brother.
The family who lived here hid 2 Jewish families from the Nazis.
England, you know, when you look at the architectural style. Well, that is because Mr. Brown, who founded this chateau, was actually from Scotland. I have some colleagues who call this the Harry Potter chateau because of its architectural style. I think it actually looks like an English boarding school.
It could be Hogwarts. Very, very English. Well done, Mr. Brown.